Welcome to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm Dr. Kristen Ryman, an integrative holistic family physician, author of Life After Lyme, and host in this virtual space of learning, healing, and growing. I believe humans are like trees, and our physical limb is only one of many. Health on all limbs of the tree, emotional, conceptual, social, spiritual, is absolutely required for the whole tree that is you to be vibrantly well. I created the Healing Grove podcast as a place to showcase some of the world's best integrative and holistic medicine, to expose you to transformative tools and mindset shifts for all limbs of your tree. I hope you enjoy our conversation in the Healing Grove today as much as I enjoyed having it. Hey, Lisa.
Hi, Kristen.
It's such a wonderful thing to have you on this podcast this week. We've been talking about this for I feel like 2 years or maybe even longer. It's finally happening, and it's perfect timing because there's a lot of exciting things happening in your world that you get to share and we get to dig into. But before we do, let me just introduce you to my audience. So Healing Grove audience, this is the fabulous Lisa Markovits. She is a good friend of mine. I've known her probably 6 years now. And it's been, an illuminating relationship. I can say that from my perspective anyway. She's been my business buddy in the coaching program we were in together back in 2018-19. And we remained biz buddies because, we love talking to each other and supporting each other. And I love what you're doing in the world. And I have just been dying to share what you're doing with the world with a larger audience. So thanks again for agreeing to be here.
Well, thank you for having me, and my best to everybody. Just a big warm embrace to everybody who's listening to us and everyone that I know you are supporting in your fabulous, informed, loving, empathetic, and grounding way that I have learned to appreciate so much as your biz buddy and friend. And I am very blessed to have had you in my life at so many levels, including learning what foods I should eliminate from my diet and getting my immune system better. Thank you for that. And I'm just tickled pink to be here and talk to everybody about how we can own it together. So Thank you
Awesome.
for having me.
Awesome. You're so welcome. All right, everyone. So I'm just going to invite you to share your story because it really is going to lead us to all the right places that we need to get to. But with a particular emphasis on, you do a lot of work with women who've lived through trauma. And one of the things that I think makes my guests, sort of the common thread through everyone I just like talking to, is that they've been able to parlay their trauma into transformation and their journey into service. And you are certainly doing that. And I wonder if you would start us off by just sharing a little bit about what brought you to this work that you're doing today.
Oh, one of those questions, huh?
Of
So
course.
this could be like 10 podcasts, but I'll keep it brief because I want to always hold space for how I believe my work can help others transform, and how you in Kristen's membership and anybody else who's hearing us have an opportunity to gently get past that trauma and get into joy. So this is one of those things that you don't pick, it picks you. And I would say that's very similar to my journey as a singer. I'm gonna speak about what led into specifically into service, although I could also just share a little of my background briefly. I'm originally from New York City and state. I went to college upstate, and after my master's degree, I moved down to Quito, Ecuador, where I lived for 30 years, and I've only recently come back to North Carolina, which is yet another world, both from Ecuador and from New York, but it's great to be back in my home country again. And I have a deep love affair with Ecuador as well. And my kids were both born there. So I'm sort of bicontinental, bicultural, certainly bilingual. And anyway, when I was living there in 2012, it was December, there was a horrific international news item. Something had happened to a young university student in New Delhi, India. I don't want to go into all the horrific details, but it was one of the worst cases of violence against women that had been so directly reported on up until that time, outside of war contexts, perhaps. because we do see this kind of thing in war. But what had happened on the streets and on this bus in India was so horrific that it turned a number of people, including me, into activists. And in my case, I was a reluctant activist. Like I was really afraid to stand up and be an activist. And partially because I think anybody who's thinking about being an activist, if they're not thinking twice about it, they should be, maybe 10 times or 100 or 1,000, because it's scary and it requires an awful lot of grit. And to stick with it for a long time is really hard. Second of all, it moves some things in me, really, really deep things, and made me realize how many of us women, in one way or another, are affected at work, in our homes, in our relationships with our children, with our spouses, our partners, at school, by a system that really is structured in a way that I don't think is good for women, but I also don't think it's good for men. And so that's a whole other conversation that I think needs to be had, and we could have. But at any rate, at that moment, what really came through my mind was, what can I, as one single woman, one single person, do to make a difference in this like huge topic, which is violence against women? And somewhere deep down inside, I said, well, I can write a song. And I can write a song that can reach people's hearts, because when we try to speak to the mind has been socially trained to accept a lot of things that shouldn't be normal, that should not be acceptable, that should be absolutely not allowed, because they're not good for anybody. To disrespect anyone, to make anyone feel small, to not hold people to their greatness. That's stuff I don't accept in general. So why was I accepting it as a woman? Why were we all accepting it as a woman? And what could I say about it? And I wrote a song. And it's actually a hip hop song in Spanish. I am very proud to say that after my younger son basically held a whip to me and forced me to send it into the international songwriting competition, which is the largest one in the world, I think, it was named a semifinalist in the Latin category. So that was pretty darn cool. But a song maybe isn't enough. You got to get it out there. And there's millions of songs available on your feeds. And anyway, very long story, very short, is I took that song. It was sponsored by the US. The production was sponsored by the US Embassy in Quito. We had Latin Grammy award-winning producer, mastering, musicians. It's really a very fun, very cool song, and I hope we can link to it so that people can go out and hear it. We took that song, we turned it into a workshop using art, where this music was the muse. We helped people realize how they were seeing the normalization of microaggressions in their lives, but through music, through art. It was fun. And so people didn't use their brains to resist it. They painted, they danced, they acted, they sang, and we're like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Then we realized that people had so much fun doing the workshop. It was like drinking sangria. Like you just like, oh, it just goes down, glug, glug, glug. And you're like that. And then you're like, oh my Lord, I'm tipsy. And that happened with the people who did the workshop. So we identified a great methodology for doing community psychosocial support work. We created a foundation. It's a US foundation. We've been operating in Ecuador for many, many years. It's called Parriba Foundation. This is so much, but anyway, that means onwards and upwards. And then the foundation used these dialogue circles to support 6,000 people over the last 6 years. And we realized we could only go to a certain point. And at that point, we needed more specialist help. And so we started gathering information, especially during the pandemic, where we went virtual with our spaces. And we said, well, we now need to be able to refer people anywhere in the country that are suffering from violence or other kinds of issues. We gathered information, and then all of a sudden we had a database of almost 1,500 places where people could go and get help from the most vulnerable populations. And we said, well, this can't possibly be kept as an in-house resource. Let's get it out to the world. And so we created Oye Sara, which is Hey Sarah, and that stands for an advanced resource support system. That's a digital platform, first of its kind, nationwide resources at your fingertips in just a couple clicks. And we have, at this point, an average of almost 24,000 people a month 24,000 unique visitors a month to the platform in a country of 18 million people going in to look for the help they need. So that is the foundation, and we've done it all with volunteers. We've had no funding. I can't begin to tell you how much work that has been. And just to finalize this very long, I said it was a long story, and I try to make it short, but there's a lot to unpack. We did research with the different methodologies we had either developed or adopted with women who had gone through very serious cases of domestic violence and were just having trouble, whether it was recent or from 10 or 20 years in their past, like getting rid of what was left of a lack of self-esteem, of not loving each other, of feeling alone, of not knowing how to handle certain situations. And that research was a US University of Delaware sponsored study. It went amazingly well. And the only constructively critical suggestion we had from the women was, we want to create more art. So I went back to the drawing board, back to the original workshop that started all this, and I created From Caterpillar to Butterfly, Shepherding Women from Trauma to Joy, which is a course I just launched. I am so excited to share it with you and your people. And that's how we got there.
That's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And you're right, there was so much to unpack. And I was privy to a little sliver of all the dynamic forces that were at work within you, and that you were creating in the world. And it was a lot. So to
I
say,
know.
I think you summed it up really nicely, like a lot in a very short amount of time. And you just accomplished so much. I want to so basically right now, if people who are already self-identifying as, oh my gosh, I have suffered trauma, I do find the residue there in my heart, I want to open it up and go to joy. How do I work with you? There's all the resources on Oye Sara in
That's in
Ecuador.
Ecuador, but that's very specifically in Ecuador. All that work we did in Ecuador, and the From Caterpillar to Butterfly course is available for the English-speaking market. So to work with
Anywhere,
me directly,
anyone,
yeah,
anyone can do
it's
that.
digital, it's self-paced, not just the US, anyone who speaks English. And the idea is to eventually translate the course into lots of different languages, because it's music and art-based, and that's a universal language. So there's no reason that, people in South America can do it. As long as they can understand it, they can do it. In Asia, in Arabic-speaking countries, um, all over Europe. Right now, anyone, Australia, New Zealand, I'm just trying to come up. I'm not so great at geography. But anyway, the point being, I do better with words and notes. Thank you very much. But all of that said, any woman who identifies with having suffered from trauma at some level, and it can be full out domestic violence, and it can be all the way on the other end of the normalized unhealthy relationships spectrum of, I really feel just disrespected. I feel like what I say is dismissed. I just don't like how I'm being treated by the world, by my partner, by my kids. And it all comes down to this lack of valuing ourselves as women and as people. So the course is just a gentle, fun way to work on this. And it's digital, it's self-paced. You do it on your time, when you feel safe, when you feel brave. It's pre-recorded. And that's the way to work with me right now, is through this course and through the community that we've set up on Facebook to support the women who go through the course. Right now, that's what's available in English
Beautiful.
currently.
Awesome. So I wonder if you would paint a little bit more of a picture around, when you say microaggressions, what sorts of behaviors? I mean, you haven't yet really mentioned behaviors, and you've really talked more about the impact on women and the self-value that is sort of at the core of why that's received in that way, or maybe even why that's possible in a relationship that's unhealthy. But what do those behaviors look like? So if someone's struggling to wonder, is this me? Like, well, I sometimes feel disrespected, but like, I'm asking because I think that a part of this for women gets tricky, because they're like, well, that's just a me problem. Like if I'm feeling lack of self-worth, or if I'm not valuing myself or letting people disrespect me, that's kind of a me problem, right? So I wonder if you'd kind of speak to that.
Okay, so I think it's a great question, and I think there's so much to be unpacked about that. I've shared a lot of that kind of information on my social media account. I launched actually on Valentine's Day, because I want Valentine's Day to be a moment of I love myself, and therefore I can have a real love with another person, right? We launched this whole series called Knowledge is Power, and you can find it. I'm on Instagram as Lisa Markovits and on Facebook as Own It Baby by Lisa Markovits. That's the name of my company. And it's something I believe in, own it. Anyway, you know, there are many, many types of behaviors that, you know, they start at a lack of respect. They go through a lack of empathy. Let me give a very simple example. And I think some of the younger generations may or may not identify with this, because I think a lot of them have already awakened and they don't put up with this stuff. But certainly in my generation, I'm not that old, I'm really not, but I'm old enough to know that we women were taught to assume that everything in the house was our responsibility. Now, we may have had enlightened people with us who helped us, right, with getting those responsibilities done, but inevitably it was our responsibility. And so we're like, okay, I know I need to be working, or I'm out trying to have fun or whatever, but oh my gosh, the laundry needs to be done. And what do I pick up for dinner? And how do I get somebody to the doctor's appointment? And so we have this constant whir and buzz in our heads. And when we are in that kind of a space where it is our responsibility, and maybe people will help us with it, and if they're not being empathetic to that, it can rub a little bit, right? This is a very simple, perhaps benign example, but how benign is it really? How benign is it? Now, yeah, maybe the hubby, maybe the partner, maybe the kids, they're busy too, but are they assuming that that food is in the fridge for them to snack on by some act of God? And maybe was it an important day for me to get my work done that fulfills me, whether it pays me or not, because it's not just about the money. And we shouldn't just be judged on this ideal of money, right? It's who am I as a person? Is what is important to me valued? It's, you know, somebody came through town. This happened to me once. Somebody came through town who was just the most amazing person that I wanted to follow as an artist. And I made a radical decision to go hear this person speak. And I was ostracized by my family for daring to take the time to do that rather than spend a couple of hours doing something else with family who were going to be in town for 5 days, who I was going to see in the evening, because my needs were not considered important. This was one of my idols. When we are not seen as individuals, as women, as having needs that should be supported, when our words are dismissed, the typical gaslighting of, what are you talking about? What do you mean that, you know, that woman, you know, she's just the secretary. What do you mean? You're crazy. So simple. So, yeah, we have a reason to feel what we're feeling. Let's talk about it. Having arguments in a relationship. I'm jumping, but I'm giving a couple examples. And like I said, I unpacked a lot of this in those social media posts. And you can also find them in a free checklist that I'm sharing, so that you can recognize if you have been or are in an unhealthy relationship. But just being in a space, I'm very honored right now to be in a romantic relationship where, yes, of course we fight. And by the way, it's good to fight. It's really not good to hold it all in. I've done that too. Not good. It's important to fight, because it's me establishing me as me and you establishing you as you, and are having to come together and dialogue and find a middle ground of some sort. And how you fight is what matters. And like I said, I'm blessed to be in a relationship where we put the relationship first, where we put love first and respect first. And we can have massive disagreements, massive differences of opinion. But we don't come out and yell at the other one, you did this, you did that. We don't do that. We say, I feel, I believe, this is important to me. And I love you enough that we can have a back and forth and try to find a place where we both grow individually and where we grow together, rather than it's collapsing into something that could get worse and worse and worse. And so,
Beautiful.
I think that would be a really summarized version of what happens, because it's usually seen as a downward spiral. And that's why we're called para arriba, onwards and upwards, because we want to raise people up. And it should be the women, and then through them, everyone around them.
I love it. And I imagine that there are multiple outcomes that could come from somebody moving through your course, moving through your dialogue circles, right? Like I'm guessing you're not really just about helping people get clear that they should leave their unhealthy relationship, right? But I think people are sometimes afraid of that, right? They're like, well, I don't want to do this therapy. I don't want to do this course. I don't want to get this transformation because it means I have to leave my partner and my family. Can you speak to that fear, which I think is probably percolating out there in some people right now?
Completely, completely. And um, I've known very healthy marriages that are based on a traditional model of the man as the breadwinner and the woman staying home and taking care of the kids and the family life. I've known healthy marriages where both choose to work. Um, you don't have to go one route or another. You have to find what works for you, right? And there can be very respectful relationships in those cases and in an awful lot of other ones, right? But there can also be relationships that are hurting us. And when that is the case, I believe in doing everything possible to work through a relationship that we value, including being willing to set aside who I thought I was, who I thought I should be, who I thought I can be, and do the work. And it's hard work, Kristen. And I think people are afraid of that work because it can be really painful. But in the end, if we're in a space that is not making us happy, what can we do to influence to make that space better for us? And I'm always going to say that the first step is to work on ourselves, because that's all we can control. We can't control the other, whoever the other is. I mean, I'm talking about it in the context of women and their romantic relationships, but this applies to everything. It applies to kids as well. And by the way, you know, if we think that we are setting a great precedent for our kids by staying in an unhappy marriage, guess what? We're not. And the kids learn from that, and they often repeat the pattern. So when we choose to do the work for ourselves, we're doing it for, I would say, a whole family line. And no, you don't have to end up outside of your current partnership. But hopefully, if it's not satisfying you, even worse, if it's threatening you or harming you, yeah, sometimes you'll have to leave, but sometimes you will discover the power in yourself to leave if that's what you need to do, and or to step off the cliff, trust that your angels or whoever you believe in are going to catch you, and go out on a limb and place a limit with your partner and say, I can't live like this anymore. I'm not happy. Maybe you're not happy either, but coming from me, speaking as I, Lisa, I'm not happy, and I need this in order to be happy. And we will discover if there really is enough true deep love to sustain that necessary change and transition and growth. And if there is, that's beautiful. And that will strengthen the relationship even more. And if there isn't, hopefully, if it has to end, it can end with the same love it started with people understanding each other and saying, we've been honest, we see why that doesn't work, and we're not willing to make those compromises or changes that are necessary to make it work, but we've loved each other, so let's separate on good terms and remain as people who care about each other. So I'm not by any means advocating for people to just jump out of the relationship, except to say that I do want them to jump out of the relationship that hurts them and jump into the one that is good for them, whether it's with that same partner, somebody new, or just in a relationship with themselves on their own.
I love that. And do you feel like I mean, it's a 6-week course, correct? Or is it 9 weeks?
It's five
Five.
modules. It's
Okay.
5 modules. There's also an introduction. There's some afterthoughts. I've included some EFT tapping, which I'm assuming people in your membership know something about. I've included a meditation because I know that there are certain moments in the course that for some people could be triggering. And I've included them not to trigger. I'm not interested. I've been triggered before. It's not a pleasant feeling. But sometimes we need to be able to name things, especially in our society. There are other spaces in which health concerns don't need to be named with a specific, Latin diagnosis, but rather
Mhm.
more holistically. And I know that's stuff that you speak to as well. But sometimes putting a name on something allows us at least to say, oh, that's what it was. Yeah, I've lived that. And then by putting that name on it, you can say, okay, now I know what it is. Now I can go look for the resources I need to solve that problem. Um, and so there are moments in which during this period, and I don't want to say it's a 5-week course. I like to say it's 5 modules because I want people to come to this when they are feeling brave and safe to come to it. I have used every tool I have gathered in, what is it now, 11 years, 12 years of working with community, of working with art. I am a singer and a composer and a writer, and I'm very empathetic, and I sense a lot, even more than I know. I'm intuitive. And I've learned a lot from being with so many people and learning their pearls of inspiration, like what helped you get past stuff. So I do share a lot of that in the modules. And like I said, I provided those, the meditation and the EFT tapping, so that if at some moment you feel like this is a little too much for me, you can pause the video and do the tapping, pause the video and do the meditation, and come back when you're ready. So the timing, this is anonymous. You can work on it without anybody else knowing. You can do it when it's a safe space for you and when you feel you're ready, and you can move on whenever you want. And I've purposely, I'm not letting anyone get access from one module to the next with fewer than 7 days in between, because I want you to process. And I also want you to go out and make art and have fun, because that's part of what we do. Is I'm going to send you to make art. And art is whatever. So don't tell me you're not a painter, and don't tell me you're not a singer. Everybody, when they were little, they drew with a stick in the sand. So whatever journal, knitting, cooking, videography, whatever you like, you're going to get to go out and play, and because we want to release your inner child. And so there's a lot of play, and the timing is up to you. And that's done on purpose.
I love it. I love it. I hope everyone who feels even a slight inclination of, yes, that is me, and that might be helpful, and I do want to get to a place of joy and healthy relationships. I hope they find this course. So thanks for bringing it into the world. I know it's been a long birth. It's been a long labor.
Gosh, you know what? All of my births have been long in every sense of the word, both the real ones of my kids and my artistic births. But I really have held space for this to be the most gentle, fun, intuitive, kind way that you can work on this for yourself, for everybody around you. And I really hope it comes through when people discover it and go through it. And I hope to use it to make a better world. It starts with us. It starts with one woman deciding to write a song or make any other piece of art, and then seeing where it goes. And I'm inviting people on an artistic and self-empowerment journey with me. That's really what this is. Yeah.
Beautiful. So where did the song go? What is it doing these days?
So I wish I could tell you that it was like being played everywhere, because that was the idea, and it may still happen. It is on every streaming platform. You can get it wherever you listen to music. You look up No More, No Mas by Lisa Markovits. There are a number of songs with no more, because evidently a bunch of us have felt that there were things in our lives we just wanted to say no more to. So you can look it up under my name. And as I said, I can send you a direct link so that your peeps can go straight to it. It's a really catchy song. Please don't hate me if you're still humming. It doesn't matter if you speak Spanish or don't speak Spanish, you're going to feel it. It's really rhythmic. It's really groovy. So anyway, we used that song as an anthem song to launch that platform in Ecuador. And it got out to a certain number of people. I mean, we had communications campaigns that reached like 1.5 million people for the platform, which clearly worked for the platform, but the song itself has not flown yet. But it's in this course. You will hear it. It is the muse, like in the original workshops I talked about. It is the muse for you to hear its message, for you to contemplate, for you to dance, for you to laugh. It's in Spanish, so I also included a lyric translation into English, so you will be able to understand what it says. It's pretty tongue-in-cheek. It's a humorous way of looking at this very difficult issue. And I'm still putting it out there that some amazing singer is going to get it out there in English as well. And I don't know if that's going to be like Beyonce or if it's going to be me. You know, long live Beyonce. She's awesome. And I would love to have a big person like that use their star power to get this anthem message out that violence is not okay, that treating each other with disrespect is not okay, that we deserve to be treated better, and that we as sisters have to support each other. And then again, maybe I'll be the one to put it out there. Who knows? Or maybe somebody else.
I love that you said it's either going to be Beyonce or it's going to be me, because it's going to be fabulous either way. But you're right. It would be awesome to have it on that kind of a stage, you know? So you've talked a lot about fun when you talk about your course, and lightness and gentleness. You've talked about humor in the song. And I wonder what role anger has to play in someone's processing of past or current ongoing trauma.
You do ask the best question. So I think anger is important. And in my life, I have been known to sit in sadness, in a lot of, woe is me, or why me, and get into a victim mentality at different points in my life when I was not feeling self-assured and self-loved, and my self-esteem had been damaged. And my mother just kept saying to me, get angry, get angry. Because there's something really empowering about anger. There is a moment. I mean, no human emotion is wrong. No human emotion is bad. Some of them are more complex to process. Love is complex too, right? It can be very complex. I mean, I once said to my brother, I want to sing some kind of a song about love at the karaoke tomorrow night. And he's like, oh, that would be 99% of all songs ever written, right? Uh, so, every emotion can be complex. And anger can be very helpful and useful. It can also get out of control. And I think we need to know when anger is appropriate and how to use it without harming ourselves or others. My releasing an anthem song into the world was an act of anger, also of beauty and joy and hope. But I didn't decide I mean, I saw that report and I said, I just can't leave a world like this for my children. I don't want to live it in anymore. I won't want them to live it in anymore. I got angry. And so I released a song, and then it led to one thing and it led to another. And every time I swore I would never do another project. And here I am. It's coming back to bite me. Watch what you say. But there is anger, and it's important. And the question is, how do you direct it? And there are a lot of people who see anger about this issue as a negative, because there are people who go out and protest this and many other causes that do harm others. And at the same time, if the issue is constantly being ignored by society, swept under a rug, and whether that's in your own living room or it's on the political stage, it gets to a point where people do get angry, and then it gets out of hand, and then people say, oh, I don't identify with that because that's all the way over there, and I'm not like that.
What do you,
But
I'm trying to
it's
imagine
necessary.
tell me more about people getting out of hand and it not being a good thing to express anger. I'm just not catching I don't have a picture of what that looks like.
I think certainly if we bring it back to the issue of domestic violence, going to anger rather than having dialogue is clearly harmful behavior. Let's start with that. And I think there are social protests at the other end of the extreme that can get to a point where they're threatening other people. And although I can certainly understand, I was just listening to a podcast about this today. in terms of some racial inequalities and how that is being faced or not faced. And, you can get to a point where you have rioting. And there's a questioning of is rioting or is, in Ecuador, we had some of the very vocal feminist groups who were going out and defacing statues. And people would come out and they would say, you're just angry. And they used some expletives. And we have nothing in common with you. And so, why are you doing that? You're just destroying things that the society built. And so on the one hand, I understand that. I do understand that. And on the other hand, what are you supposed to do when you've talked and you've done peaceful this and peaceful that, and you've had whole movements and you've had songs and you've had this, and nobody's listening? Wouldn't you get angry? Wouldn't you get angry? And then it just keeps, I mean, the anger rises, the dialogue falls, and then there's no middle space. And I think at the risk of being lynched by people who are on the extremes, some of whom have valid points to make, I've been holding space in the middle. And that's really hard. It's like trying to play king, or should I say Queen Solomon, of saying, well, I see your point, but I see their point, and can't we find a place for dialogue? And I'm trying to hold this center space in a society that values the soundbite. In a society where at all levels, for all issues, nobody can talk to each other. We're all screaming at each other. And I'm trying to say that there is a space in the middle. And I actually think that the silent majority is in the middle. And we haven't had a way to voice. We haven't known how to create those spaces when we're being pulled constantly to the edges, because that gets sound bites, and that's quicker for social media. I'm looking at deep conversations with ourselves first, and then with the other. And we have been taught to digest everything quickly. I'm going to ask you to take a moment out of your day, out of your week, out of your month, depends how long you feel the need to do that, and to contemplate and create. When was the last time you sat down over something that really bothered you and used it as a catalyst for creation? That's beautiful, deep work. When was the last time? I'm going to ask this to all of the people who are listening. When was the last time you did that? When was the last time you took moments out of your day for you and said, this is upsetting me. This hurts me. This bothers me. I'm angry about this. I'm sad about this. Put the emotion on it that you want. And I need to take it out of my body and make it into something else. And that's what art is. And art is also when there's beauty and you want to show it. It's not only an expression of difficult things that we want to get rid of course. And through the course, we will do both. We will both take some of those difficult emotions that are weighing us down and put them onto an object that we will then destroy as a symbolic way of healing ourselves from it. And we will also create art that represents our dreams and that we will keep as a constant reminder of what our dreams are. But again, we have to sit with it. And how many people are willing nowadays to take that brave journey? I don't know. I hope a lot. That's what I am proposing.
It's beautiful. Well, in a way, it's so I think at some level, it's art therapy. Art therapy, this is what it is, right? It's finding your pain and your suffering and your traumas, and you're finding a way to get it out into something in the world that isn't your body anymore and just your head. So, but you're not a therapist. Have you ever gotten blowback because you're not a therapist, you're not a social worker, you're not a psychologist?
So welcome to the world of labeling and certifications that is so important in the United States of America and many Western countries. I've internalized that, and I've given myself that blowback. I haven't even waited for anybody else to do it. I just self-judge. Thank you very much.
It's more efficient that way anyway. Get it over
Oh
with.
gosh, yeah, I'm really good at it too. I'm really, really good at it. And one of the things I've had to learn to do through my art is just free myself of that inner judgment and just say, you know what? I'm going to go out there and sing because it makes me really happy. And some people think I do it very well. And if you follow along on my Instagram, I sometimes put up things of me singing. And, I've recorded a CD, and it's kind of old. I'm not even really selling it anymore, but I will probably at some point do more artwork. I've spent so much time on creating all of this for society that I stepped away from my own art, which is not good. Beyond the self-judgment, like I'm recognizing that I need more of it. And so I'm doing it again, which makes me really, really happy. That is my joy, is to stand up on a stage and sing, which for some people would be like, oh my God, really? Do I have to, like, I don't want to do that. But for me, it's just fun. Anyway, I just lost where I was going with this.
Well, the world
Oh
of
yeah, the therapist.
certifications.
Okay,
Yeah.
so here's the thing. I am a trained community therapist in this methodology that comes out of Brazil, and anybody can be a community therapist. You don't need a 4-year degree or a graduate degree or anything. You need to take a rigorous certification course in which you learn how to hold space for people using music, using poetry, and certainly I have a lot of education in other fields. And as an artist, I, as well as a person, but as an artist, I am trained to move through and with emotion. And I think that in reality, that is what a therapist does of any sort. They learn tools to help people on their own journey, because in the end, I'm just a guide. One of the things we learn as community therapists is that people are experts in their own lives. And that doesn't mean that you don't sometimes need a specialist like Dr. Kristen Ryman to guide you or bring you specific knowledge that you need, because of course you do. And there are people who really know that. But we've spent 6 years now helping over 6,000 people to learn that they have the tools within themselves to heal themselves. And I'm offering art and music and even ritual, non-denominational, because this is not a religious course in any way. And ritual can be as simple as lighting a candle or taking a bath. There's so many ways to do ritual. Just this ancient human knowledge of I need to paint something. I need to express myself. I need to find a way to seal the choice that I have made. That's what ritual really is. And that's why we have it when we're born. And I've decided to come into the world, to come of age. I have decided that it's time for me to take on my own life. I get married. I decide that I am going to be with a partner. I die. My time is over. And these are all key times for ritual. I don't care what your religion is, or even if you don't have a religion, the society has things around this. And there's a reason for it. We need to mark certain things. So when people come and say to me, but you're not I'm like, you're right. I'm a human being. And I therefore have a right to share what I have lived, what has helped me, and offer it. It's my offering to the world. And I really do believe that you don't need to be labeled by some organization. Now, I will say that I once reached out to a coaching organization that was offering some very special arts therapy, expressive arts therapy certification. And I reached out to them and they said, well, tell me your background. And so I told them everything I've done in short version, like I did at the beginning of this podcast interview. And they said to me, well, you could sign up for it. It's next year, but I think you could teach the course.
Yeah. Yeah. Want to come teach for us, I'm sure is what they said.
They did. So you know what? I'm beyond the labels. I hate being put in a box. I am an artist. Do not put me in a box. I don't need it. If I'm what you need, you will know it. You will come to me and I will be there for you. And we'll start with this online course. And if it evolves into something else, I'm informing the universe and anybody who's listening that I'm willing to do other things as well, in ways that are healthy for me and healthy for others. That's where we are.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're going to put all the links to all the things that people could need to find you and your work and the song and the course in the show notes. But before we end, I want to hear you explain Own It, Baby. Where did that come from? What does it mean? And
Yeah,
can we all take a little piece of that away for ourselves?
yeah, it's a great story. And I had debated if I was going to share it, but it is it's really fun. And you were there and you know what it's all about. So there are people who know. So the word will get out anyway. So I might as well have it be my word. So we were in a coaching course together with a master coach who had in his former life been a master hypnotist. And as a woman from an academic family, very intellectual, I mean, that was my upbringing. And again, I've used my art to balance the mind with the heart and the soul, right? Because I really believe we need both. Um, but anyway, I was, very skeptical. I can be very skeptical. But once I'm convinced, I'm totally convinced. And he said, we're going to hypnotize everybody in the room. And I sat there and I said, no way, can't hypnotize me. I'm not going to be, I fought it. I fought it. Just like, people may be fighting, oh, I don't want to recognize this, whatever in my life. I was like, nobody can hypnotize me. Yeah, I had a dose of humility there because he did. And I went into this, I wasn't a hypnotist thing like you see in the movies where, all of a sudden you walk like a zombie. I don't mean that, but it was like I really went deep inside. And he says to us, okay, so we're here in this coaching program learning to be our highest healed selves. And so you're going to walk into a forest, in your own mind, of course, this is all happening. And it's just young you, young Lisa in this case. And you're going to walk through this forest and you're going to get to a gate and you're going to ring a bell and your highest healed self is going to come walking towards you. And you're going to be able to ask your highest healed self one question, which is, how did you get there? And so this is what's going on in hypnotism. And I'm seeing myself as a young teenager, actually. I was in denim shorts in my mind. I'm in denim shorts and a t-shirt and my hair's a mess. And I'm wearing like sneakers and I'm walking through this forest and I get to a gate and I ring the bell and I'm like, dude, why is this taking so long? Who's my highest heal? This is all going through my mind and my heart and my spirit as I'm hypnotized, right? And all of a sudden, like a spotlight comes on in the forest and somebody starts just sauntering in, right? And who shows up at the gate but Marilyn Monroe, full white gown, dripping in diamonds, hair perfectly coiffed, red lipstick. And she just, and a fur stole. And I'm sitting there, my teenage self looking up at like, oh my God, the star power. And she's right in front of me. And what are you talking about? And I was afraid. And so she just looks at me expectantly, waiting for me to ask this question that, of course, our coach had told us we could ask. And I looked at her and I said, well, what do I need to do to become you? Which is really, of course, to become me, right? At some level. Not that I'm Marilyn Monroe, but you get the point. And I look up at her and she just stares at me, throws, I didn't throw yet. She stares at me and she's like, she contemplates for a second and she says, own it, baby. Throws the stole over her shoulder and saunters back out of the forest.
I love that story so much. And I feel like I was just hypnotized and in the same forest with you listening to it.
It was just,
Yes.
it's such a great story. And it really is what I saw. And I haven't unpacked everything about what that means. Although I did watch a YouTube video the other day about Marilyn Monroe, in which she is talking about how she was beginning to create her own production company. Marilyn Monroe is seen as the ultimate sex symbol, and it was her physicality and her whispering voice and how she would sing, happy birthday, Mr. President. And that's how people think of her. But on that one interview, I was fascinated to see her actually taking a stand where she was owning it for herself. And she was there talking about how she wanted to have different, deeper types of roles. And that really made me think twice about what is behind the women that we idolize in this very traditional sense of female sexuality and who they are as icons and who they can or could have been if we had seen everything they were when they owned it. And I think that's really more what she represents to me than what other people might see her as. So that was kind of fun digging into those archives.
So interesting. And I love that you left us with that glimpse of another reframe for Marilyn, and for all women, really. multidimensional, multifaceted, powerful beings who sometimes have trauma that needs to be worked through.
And who deserve to reclaim their joy,
Mm.
our whole selves, and be surrounded by people, whether it's our family or our spouses or people we work with who value us for who we are. And that only happens when we value ourselves fully. And that's what Own It Baby's about. And that's the idea of from caterpillar to butterfly. It's time to go onwards and upwards and fly off into joy. That's what it is.
I love it. I think that's where we end. Thank you, Lisa Markovits. So wonderful to talk to you always. And I really just am so grateful for what you are being and bringing to the world.
Thank you. Thank you, dear friend and buddy, Kristen Ryman, for everything you're doing. And my invitation again to anybody in your people who think that maybe this is something that's underlying some of their health issues, or that just want to have some time for themselves, or want to change the way that the patterns have been running in their families. I think those are all good reasons to come and check out what I'm working on. And I look forward to seeing you and holding space for you. So thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healing Grove podcast. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to deepen your experience further, consider grabbing a copy of the Healing Grove Playbook. With journal prompts for this podcast and 41 others, it's the perfect place to record your learnings, keep track of the tools you explore, and reflect on your own experience. Finally, it's important to mention that even though I am a doctor, nothing you hear on this podcast, whether from myself or my guests, constitutes medical advice. Any intervention you try should always be discussed with and supervised by a trusted member of your own healing team. Thanks for listening, and see you next time in the Healing Grove.